Welcome to Hatman Strikes Back Daily Boxing News. So as you can see from the title of the stream, Deontay Wilder is back. Also, a topic of discussion in today's stream, Daniel Dubois breaks his silence. Yes, we've heard from his trainer Don Charles since the pullout of the Joseph Parker fight. We've heard from his promoter Frank Warren. But up until the past couple days, we hadn't heard from the man himself. His absence from the spotlight, from social media and so on, was seen as conspicuous in the eyes of many. Not necessarily to me, but other people feel like it's a sign of potential guilt that he ducked the Joseph Parker fight. We'll come on to that, all right? First of all, I want to shout out to each and every one of you in the live chat. I hope you're all feeling good today. And I will come on to your questions and comments once we've got through the main topics of discussion, and then we can open it up to broader topics if you guys like. The past few live streams, we've been stuck on the pyramids. We've been talking about Emperor Palpatine, the nature of reality, science, and whatever else that you guys want to get into, as well as boxing topics, of course, or maybe entertainment. People like talking about films. I've done several streams now talking about movies, also video games. There was a friend of mine actually who is on my Patreon, somebody I know personally. I've known him for 20 odd years or something. And yeah, he was talking and giving me feedback regarding the live stream I did where I talked extensively about gaming. So maybe we'll get into gaming again. But anyway, let's get into this boxing news, all right? We'll start off by talking about Daniel Dubois. So Daniel Dubois did this interview. This was uploaded on the Box Nation YouTube channel. And as you can see from their title, it says, Daniel Dubois left fuming over Joseph Parker situation. Now, I found this interview pretty funny. Because an angry Daniel Dubois, well, you certainly wouldn't want to be on the receiving end of his punches, whether he's angry or not. But as a viewer, watching an angry Daniel Dubois with this weird Best Dad Bod t-shirt on was amusing to me. You know, Dubois has unusual mannerisms, an unusual personality and demeanor and so on. And, you know, we've all speculated about why that is. And the stuff he was saying here regarding the Joseph Parker pullout, him pulling out of the Joseph Parker fight, was interesting, funny, so on and so forth. Now, he's obviously frustrated by the stuff people are saying about him, that he's scared of Parker, he didn't want that smoke, he came up with some excuse. Anything is possible, folks. But here's why I'm not particularly convinced by that narrative. First of all, Daniel Dubois is on a great run of form. He's gone in there and he's smashed up Jarrell Miller. He's smashed up Filip Hrgović. He's smashed up Anthony Joshua. I don't understand why a guy who's just beaten those three opponents would suddenly be so scared of Joseph Parker that he would pull out on fight week. It's not like Joseph Parker was his mandatory. Parker is WBO mandatory, not IBF mandatory. Remember, Daniel Dubois is IBF heavyweight champion. Dubois picked Joseph Parker as a voluntary defense. Why would you pick someone as an opponent and then get so scared at the last minute that you pull out? It seems improbable to me. I'm not saying it's impossible, but to me, it seems highly improbable. So I tend to suspect that he actually was sick, because we had another opponent that was sick on fight week in Saudi that was supposed to be on that show fighting Shakur Stevenson, and he pulled out. And Daniel Dubois' team, you know, you guys make of this what you will. Some of you won't believe it perhaps. But Daniel Dubois' team say that this is not the first time he suffered from this particular illness in the run-up to a fight. Now, some people might say, well, why didn't he pull out of the previous fights then? And only this one? Well, we don't know when he was ill during those camps, whether it was a bit earlier on. We don't know how severe the illness was in previous camps and so on, right? But I take on board people's point regarding that. But Daniel Dubois suggested in various interviews, certainly the one with Box Nation, that the environment in Saudi Arabia had something to do with him getting ill. Whether there's certain bugs out there, because bear in mind, his last 2 fights were in Saudi against, his last fight was in the UK at Wembley. But his 2 fights prior to fighting Anthony Joshua were in Saudi against Jarrell Miller and Filip Pergovic. So has he noticed something when he's out there? He, in this interview, talked about the air conditioning potentially contributing to him getting ill. Now, some people are going to scoff at that and say, oh, that's ridiculous. Well, let me tell you something about living in the Middle East. I've lived there. I don't live there now. I lived there for a couple of years in the past. I have never experienced aircon as cold as the aircon in the Middle East. It's incredible. I don't know, the technicalities of these AC units they have out in the Middle East, but I can assure you they go much colder than any AC units I've ever encountered in any other country. When you go to those Gulf states, the rich Arab nations, their AC can go to damn near sub-zero. It's like freezing cold. When you go in the malls, a lot of the malls in like Qatar and these Middle Eastern countries, the malls are like freezing cold. You're thinking like, hang on, isn't this overkill? Obviously, it's blazing hot outside in the middle of summer. Even in spring, it can be very hot, or early autumn. But surely you'd want a nice ambient temperature. But in some of these places in the Middle East, absolutely freezing cold AC. And it can throw off your immune system if you're not used to it. I remember the first time I went out to the Middle East. Was it the first time? Well, my brother was living out there anyway, working out there. And I went to go visit him. And we were going to go to the cinema together, right? I'd never been to a cinema out there. And this is middle of summer, blazing hot. He says to me, oh, you should bring a jumper or a hoodie. And I was like, are you mad? What are you talking about, jumper or a hoodie? It's like 45, nearly 50 degrees outside. What do I need a jumper or a hoodie for? He's like, trust me, in the cinema, not so much in the mall. The mall temperature, he said, was okay-ish. Like cool, but not crazy. He said, inside the cinema, it's freezing cold. Don't ask me why they have it like that, but that's how they do it here. Freezing cold inside the cinema. I was like, nah, come on. I'm coming from the UK. I'll be all right. You've just forgotten how cold the UK is. You just got too used to these Middle Eastern temperatures that you've forgotten what, real cold feels like. So I was like, nah, man, I didn't want to listen to the guy. I didn't bring a jacket or a hoodie or a jumper or anything like that. I just came in my t-shirt. Boy, did I regret it. Because when I got in that cinema, oh my gosh, I had goosebumps. It was so damn cold. Unbelievable. Right? So, look, I don't know what the AC was like in Daniel Dubois' room, whether he had much control over it. I don't know. Some of these hotels have obviously got central air conditioning. So with that, a lot of time, maybe you don't have the remote or you've got less control. Some of them, you've got the AC unit actually in the room and you do have full control over it. So I don't know what the situation was. And some of them, by the way, some of these AC units, the temperature doesn't go very high. So it's going to be stuck on pretty damn cold all the time. And also if the filter hasn't been cleaned, there's all sorts of things with AC units that could potentially affect somebody's health or contribute to them getting ill. Sudden changes in temperature and stuff like that. So I'm not here to try and make excuses for Daniel Dubois. All I'm telling you is I don't find this notion that he genuinely got ill to be so far-fetched and ridiculous. People get ill, folks. Even going through a training camp, when you are pushing your body to the limit every day, it can actually start to weaken your immune system. And so when you're tapering down in maybe the final week, 10 days, before the actual fight, some people even 2 weeks before the fight, that's when your immune system can start to get back on its feet. But there's always the potential there to still get ill and whatnot. So anyway, that's my take on Daniel Dubois. He's saying that he's angry. He wants to get in there against Joseph Parker. He wants to fight Alexander Usyk, but he actually said he would prefer to fight Parker than Usyk next. I think that's a foolish comment for him to make because I can't imagine his team would prefer him to fight Parker first rather than Usyk. Because fighting Usyk next means undisputed, whereas fighting Joseph Parker means that Dubois potentially could miss out on ever becoming undisputed champion or fighting in an undisputed title fight. So I think that's anger making him say foolish things. I think the right thing for him to do for his career, I'm not talking about morally with regards to Joseph Parker. I'm saying the right thing I think for his career would be to fight Alexander Usyk next. It's not like Alexander Usyk is a soft touch, folks. It's not like he's swerving Parker to take on a donut, a cream puff, or a bum, is it? No. He's pulled out the Parker fight, claiming he was ill, to go and take on somebody who is the number one in the world, better than Joseph Parker in Alexander Usyk. So I think that's the move for him to make. Joseph Parker is WBO interim champion. That interim has been called. So, Usyk could get stripped either before the Dubois fight or potentially just after it. So Parker's going to get his opportunity. That mandatory has been called, all right? So that's my take on this situation. Just scrolling through a few Daniel Dubois pictures here. For some reason, that picture cracks me up. Dubois' face and, the anger that he expressed in this interview, in particular. So, let me know what you guys thought about it if you've seen this interview and what you made of it all. I know there are going to be some people in the comments who are absolutely adamant that Daniel Dubois swerved Joseph Parker and that he's terrified of him and all this type of stuff. I mean, look, anything is possible, but it just doesn't seem probable to me. Think about who Daniel Dubois has fought. Think about the manner of his victories. Think about the fact that he picked Joseph Parker as an opponent. In fact, one last thing on the Joseph Parker situation and the AC. Daniel Dubois said that, Daniel Dubois basically suggested that he would like his next fight to be in the UK. Again, alluding to the idea that there's something about the environment or the atmosphere in Saudi Arabia that is contributing to him getting ill. So let's see if Turki Al-Sheikh, Frank Warren, the people around Daniel Dubois can make that happen for him, because he doesn't seem particularly keen on fighting in Saudi Arabia again. And there have been other fighters. There's been, particularly in the American boxing scene, this narrative going round that you will get ill or something will happen to you. Some people are even suggesting that you might get poisoned in Saudi Arabia, right? So there is kind of a growing paranoia in some circles, mostly in America, but maybe Daniel Dubois is also buying into that because of the way he felt going into the fight with Joseph Parker that never was, right? But then again, people are going to point out, why did you perform so well against Jarrell Miller? That was in Saudi. Why did you perform so well against Filip Hrgović? That was in Saudi. Two of the best performances of his career were in Saudi Arabia. So anyway, we'll leave that there. Moving on to the main topic of this stream. And yes, I will get onto your chats, your questions and comments. So hold tight. Deontay Wilder is back. He returns to action in Wichita, which is in, where is it again? Wichita in, it doesn't actually say the state there. Let me check the thumbnail that I made for this. It tells me on the thumbnail. Hold tight, folks. I got what state it's in. Where are we at? Oh, Kansas. Excuse me. So yes, Deontay Wilder returns to action on Friday, the 27th of June in Wichita, Kansas, against a guy called Tyrell Herndon. Never heard of this guy before, but we can have a look at his record here. He is 24-5 with 15 KO wins. 4 of his 5 losses have come by knockout. From the United States, 37 years of age, 6'3" in height. Now, there is nobody on his record, on the win column, that you'll recognize. So there's no point in even talking about this guy's wins. I will, however, show you his losses because some of them are names that you will recognize. Not this guy. The first person he lost to was someone called Shamarian Snyder. Some of these names are crazy. Who was 4-1-1 at the time, 30 years of age. He stopped Tyrell Herndon in the 3rd round. Knocked him out. His next loss was to a debuting Efe Ajagba. This was back in 2017. Ajagba knocked him out in the 1st round. His next loss was to Brandon Glanton, a 26-year-old at the time who was 4-0. He beat Herndon by 3rd round disqualification. His next loss was to a guy called Corey Barlow, who is 2-4-2, right? He stopped Tyrell Herndon in the 1st round. That's a crazy name, Corey Barlow. That is a crazy name, folks. And then his most recent loss was against Richard Torres Jr., who most of you will be familiar with. He stopped Tyrell Herndon in the 2nd round. So whenever this guy has fought anybody with a pulse, he's got stopped. The question is, does Deontay Wilder still have a pulse? Because this is a guy who has had a torrid time over the past few years. Deontay Wilder has lost 4 of his last 5 fights. He hasn't won a fight for 3 years. And this is why I've got no issue with him fighting an opponent the level of Tyrell Herndon. Because Deontay Wilder really should retire, in my opinion anyway. I think he's completely finished. He's washed. He's 39 years of age. He's been inactive over the past few years. He's lost 4 of his last 5 fights. 2 of them have been devastating knockout defeats. His confidence is absolutely rock bottom. You only have to look at the Joseph Parker fight and in particular the Zhilei Zhang fight to see that. So under the circumstances, even though I think he should retire, if he wants to fight on, I can't blame him for taking on a Tyrell Herndon in a confidence builder. Because God knows he needs some confidence builders. He might need to have several fights like this before he goes in there against anybody with a pulse, even a fringe world level guy. Because if Wilder is to carry on, he's never going to be what he used to be. We know that. Tyson Fury ruined him. But if he is to carry on, and if he is to fight anybody with a pulse in future, I at least want to see him go in there with some confidence. Because then it will make it somewhat entertaining when he starts to sling those big right hands and whatnot. I don't ever want to see the version of Deontay Wilder who fought Zhilei Zhang ever step in a boxing ring again. You know what I mean? I don't want to see anything like that again. Totally one-sided. Wilder cowering anytime Zhilei Zhang started to let his hands go. It looked awful. I want to see Deontay Wilder start swinging back with some fire from early. I want to see some confidence in his body language. And if we're to ever see that, as I say, he's going to need some confidence builders. Now, some people are going to say, well, hang on. You're saying it's too late for AJ to have confidence builders now and come back and do X, Y, Z. Yeah, I'm saying it is too late. I'm saying AJ shouldn't go anywhere near the top guys in the division. And he should only fight the likes of Deontay Wilder if he wants to carry on. The whole idea of the AJ rebuilding process previously was about him potentially getting back to his best. I wanted to see whether he still had that in him. But evidently, after what happened against Daniel Dubois, he didn't have it in him. You know what I mean? So AJ, to me, is like a fight or two away. I think he should retire now, same like Wilder. But if he insists on continuing, he should understand his level. And his level would be to fight the likes of the Bronze Bomber, Dylan White, Tyson Fury, because of the history between them and the fact that Fury's coming off a couple of losses himself and so on. But the young guys, the Dubois and people like that, leave them alone, bro. Leave them alone. Same like Deontay Wilder should leave those guys alone, in my opinion. Yeah? The comeback for Wilder, at least in my head, is about, him maybe getting a fight against one of his contemporaries. Yeah? It's not about him getting back to his best. I think he's never going to get back to his best. His best is long gone. I mean, I think there would have been a greater chance of AJ getting back to his best because of the fact he's younger than Wilder and because of the fact that he's technically better than Wilder. Deontay Wilder has always been so technically poor that his power, his will to win, that tremendous fire that he had in him, the fighting spirit, that was far more important to Deontay Wilder's success. It was a far bigger component in his success than it would be in, let's say, an Anthony Joshua's success or a Tyson Fury or fighters who are more technical than Wilder. Yeah? They've got technique, a certain amount at least, to fall back on as they age. Whereas Deontay Wilder doesn't have that, which makes it more perilous for him, especially since the fire within him seems to have, if not been extinguished, then at least severely diminished. So, yeah. If Wilder's going to get back in there against even a fringe contender, somebody with a pulse, I want to see him with a bit of confidence. Do you know what I mean? Like, yo, we can't have that same Wilder who fought Zhang getting back in there. That's not fun. That's not entertaining. I mean, the knockout was fun and entertaining, but what preceded the knockout was not. It was kind of sad. Yeah, so I got no issue with him knocking over a couple of pies to get his confidence up a little bit and then, maybe take on someone in the top 20. We'll see. Let me know what you guys think about this in the comment section below. Deontay Wilder taking on Tyrell Herndon, a habitual loser. And look, this is a fight that Deontay Wilder should be able to regain his confidence in. If he can't, and obviously worse comes to worse, he gets knocked out or beaten by Tyrell Herndon, then he will be a dead horse that surely no promoter out there will want to even try and flog. Now, I should just say, this fight is in obscurity in Wichita, Kansas. Some people are mocking that and saying how it's funny. Yeah, it is kind of funny, but much of Deontay Wilder's early career was in obscurity as well. He was fighting in Alabama and many of the southern states against rednecks and whatnot, people who look like they've been literally pulled out of the crowd or pulled out of a bar. And that process of building Deontay Wilder's confidence as a young heavyweight worked. It was a long process that went on for several years, and by the time he stepped up and fought somebody with a pulse, I think he'd had over 30 fights. He obviously is not going to take that long, well, I would assume anyway, in this particular phase of his career. He might have 2 or 3 fights maybe in obscurity. And one of the things that I think will probably help Wilder is there won't be so much pressure on him, because this is not a big Riyadh season card. This is not a big card in New York or Vegas, right? This is somewhere in the middle of nowhere, a backwater in Wichita, Kansas. And I'm sure there will be locals who turn out of curiosity to watch Deontay Wilder presumably headlining this very obscure show. But yeah, it won't be anything like the pressure that Deontay Wilder is used to. And so without the pressure, without all the eyes on him against the soft opponent, maybe we'll see some glimpses of the old Bronze Bomber. Maybe we'll see that southern jig that he used to do. Remember when Wilder used to knock people out and then he'd do this like weird southern jig type thing. He's like spinning around in circles in the ring. Wilder is just so country, it's unbelievable. But anyway, we'll turn this one over to the live chat. Shout out to everyone. Just check in case you got any super chats. We do. Shout out to Mr. Luca for a super chat. He says, Daniel Dubois versus DC and Alexander Usyk versus Joe Parker. If Frank is smart. And there's a super chat here from Gaz. He says, Tony versus Breedis at Cruiserweight Primes. All right. Thank you both for the super chats. Daniel Dubois versus DC. Who's DC? DC? You're always giving me initials. When I heard DC, I'm always thinking Daniel Cormier from the UFC. Who's DC? I'm racking my brains here. Someone throw me a bone. Somehow the chat is not updating already. Oh, Derek Chisora, excuse me. Derek Chisora, I'm thinking of top heavyweights. Okay. Let's think about that one now. Daniel Dubois versus Derek Chisora and Alexander Usyk versus Joseph Parker next if Frank is smart. All right, so, yeah, from a promoter's perspective, that would be smart. But as a fan, I don't ever want to see Daniel Dubois versus Derek Chisora. That's not a fight I have the slightest bit of interest in. But yeah, Frank is smart. He would do that because these are all in-house fights. Well, actually, no, excuse me. 3 of the 4 fighters mentioned are Frank Warren fighters, but obviously Alexander Usyk isn't. Usyk versus Parker. I see where you're going with it because then Frank Warren gets 2 bites at the cherry, but potentially he gets 2 bites of the cherry anyway. But I guess you're saying that with Dubois fighting Chisora, that's an easy win for Dubois. So he gets another defense under his belt, continues to build his profile, and then builds into a Alexander Usyk fight if Usyk gets past Parker. And of course, in the meantime, if Parker pulls it off against Usyk, then you've got Dubois versus Parker. So yeah, I completely take on board your point. It's a particularly good one if you're thinking from the promoter's perspective. Shout out to Mr. Luca. And Tony versus Breedis at Cruiserweight. I go with, I'll probably go with Breedis. Not as confidently as I would go with Usyk beating James Toney, because Toney was a slippery character at Cruiserweight and Heavyweight against the slower guys. But Breedis is a pretty good boxer. Obviously not the level of an Usyk, but he's a pretty good boxer. He's very powerful. And if you look at the Sam Peter James Toney fights, you can see that James Toney, if you've got enough size and strength on him, can be beaten even at long range and whatnot and out-muscled and out-hustled. So I'll probably lean towards Breedis beating Toney at Cruiserweight. Toney's best days were really at super middleweight and even middleweight, right? That's where he was at his best. Light heavyweight and up, he had mixed results. So that's what I would go. I know James Toney's a legendary figure. He's one of my favorite fighters, actually, of all time. I love his style, his confidence in the ring, his ruthlessness, his toughness, that slick inside fighting ability, the shoulder roll, the counter-punching of James Toney was always fantastic. Great hand speed, great chin, everything. But he's not invincible. He got beat plenty of times. As I said in the live stream the other night, he got beat by an obscure fighter called Drake Tadzi at light heavyweight. Montel Griffin beat him as well at light heavyweight. So, yeah, I'd go with Breedis slightly. You know, I lean towards Breedis. All right, let's get to some other comments here. Shout out to Joe in the chat. Shout out to Set, Real Truth, Jay Silva. We got Reese, Isaac in the chat. The Stanimal. Shout out to the Stanimal. Cash says, is it being televised? That's a good question, actually. Let me check if the Deontay Wilder fight is being televised. It normally tells you on BoxRec. It doesn't have any details of it being televised on BoxRec as yet, but it still might be because as it stands right now, Wilder versus Tyrell Herndon is the only fight listed on the show. So they haven't even listed the undercard yet. So once the undercard is on there, if the show is being televised, that's when it might show up on the BoxRec page. So we will see, but it's perfectly possible that it won't be. I suspect it probably will, though. Some local station is surely going to want to have a camera down there, a camera crew down there, should I say, to film Deontay Wilder. So it may not be on a major network, like a national network. It might be on a local network. There are lots of like local television networks in the United States. It's like when Dylan White fought... Actually, no. When Dylan White fought Christian Hammer, that actually was on Sky, wasn't it? I was thinking it might have just been on a local station in Ireland, but I think it actually was on Sky. But yeah, in America anyway, 50 states, they do have local television networks and obscure little channels that will film, you know, their local sporting events and whatnot. So maybe we'll see it on one of those. If not, surely somebody will be at ringside filming it on their smartphone. You know, you're more likely to get that type of footage, which can sometimes be pretty decent footage, you know, smartphone footage, at a local obscure show rather than at a major show. Because at a major show, the security might come in and say, no filming and all that type of stuff. But at these obscure shows, it's sometimes a lot easier to get footage with a camera phone or whatnot. So, yeah, that's a good question. Shout out to Punch Quote. Shout out to Cash. Cash says, does he really need 3 months to prepare for this guy? Well, probably not, but it's not necessarily that he needs 3 months to prepare. That just might be the date given to him by the promoter of the event. Who said, well, this is the date, and there you go. Wilder might want to fight sooner. Who knows? AB guy says, Deontay was never a good fighter as he was perceived to be. Fury knew, which was why he picked on his, I guess you meant to say, picked him on his return to boxing. I would concur with that. Dolmite says, then the rematch of Audley Harrison next for Wilder. Cash says, I've never heard someone refer to Chisora as DC before, though. Me neither. Normally when I hear DC, I'm thinking of Daniel Cormier from UFC. Because whenever he's doing commentary for UFC, they call him DC. Joe Rogan calls him DC. So it's like, it threw me off a bit at DC. Afro Jam says, hope him and AJ can just fight before the end of the year. Won't be the best version of either, but it will get rid of a big what if. True indeed. As I say, if AJ and Wilder insist on continuing, they should fight each other. Or other contemporaneous heavyweights. You know, people from their generation, the Dylan Whites of the world. Tyson Fury even. Those are the guys they should be fighting. Shout out to Jay Silver for the super chat. He says, they might show the fight on Malik Scott's OnlyFans. I shudder at the thought of Malik Scott's OnlyFans. Does he still have an OnlyFans even though he's married to Kate Abdo? Oh my God, imagine if they both started doing OnlyFans. That would really be weird. That'd really be weird. That's one of the weirdest boxing romances ever. Maybe not as weird as Kell Brook and Ebony Bridges, but still weird. You know, Malik Scott hooking up with Kate Abdo. It's just such an unlikely pairing between those two. And I saw some suggestion. No, it wasn't a suggestion, excuse me. I saw some report a while ago that since engaging and then marrying Malik Scott, Kate Abdo's thinking about partaking in a Misfits bout against some woman. Yeah. The world just gets stranger and stranger. Shout out to Ben Scott for the super chat. He says, bizarre matchup, Billy Joe Saunders versus Errol Spence at 160. It is a bizarre matchup. Who would I go with there? I'll probably go with Billy Joe. Just with the extra size and slickness. I mean, he wasn't a big 160. But just edge towards Billy Joe, maybe. But who knows? Maybe Errol Spence would have been too consistent for him in there. In fact, no, let me switch it. Let me say, see, it's speculation. It's always speculation when it's a fantasy matchup, but even more so because Spence never fought at 160, right? So we don't know what he would have been like in that weight class. So, no, I'm going to stick with Billy Joe Saunders. Shout out to Ben for the super chat. KS says, no chance Kate Abdo goes on his OnlyFans. CBS won't allow it. Okay, I'm kind of missing what is being suggested there. Jackie Boy Johnson says, Kate Abdo thinks she's American. Yeah, she does have a slight American twang since she's been working in America broadcasting for so long. I can't really hate on it because Americans, and I'm being very serious here, a lot of Americans cannot understand British accents, that even have the slightest bit of regional dialect to them. Okay, so many Americans, when they hear somebody with a northern accent, I think Kate Abdo's from, Manchester? Some Americans, when they hear somebody with a Manchester accent, they literally can't understand what somebody from Manchester in the UK is actually saying. They're like, what the hell is this person saying? I've seen these videos where Americans react to different UK accents, and some of them are sat there dumbfounded, thinking that these British people are speaking a different language. It's not even English. So when you've got millions of people in America like that, I can't really blame Kate Abdo for like Americanizing her accent a little bit, because you can still hear that she's got an English accent, but she's kind of softened it and Americanized it a bit to make it more palatable for American audiences. Oh, CBS, the network. I'm buzzing. What are you talking about, Chris Billum-Smith? CBS, the network. Why would CBS, the network, have anything to do with not allowing Malik Scott to do OnlyFans? Or Kate Abdo to do OnlyFans. Excuse me. All right. Does Kate Abdo work for CBS? Because maybe Kate Abdo does other sports, you guys tell me. But CBS owns Showtime, and Showtime don't do boxing anymore. And Kate Abdo has kind of bounced around between different networks. She seems like one of these free agent types. She's been on DAZN, I think. She's been on Netflix. She was on Netflix for the Mike Tyson, Jake Paul thing, right? She's also been on Fox and so on. Okay, she does football stuff for CBS. All right. Ocean Blue says, I thought she worked for DAZN. She's one of these people that has some kind of free agent status where she can bounce around all over the place. Kind of like Barry Jones was doing for a while. You know, Barry Jones would pop up on TNT or BT as it was before. Then he'd be on Sky. Then he'd be on DAZN. You know, Barry Jones is bouncing around all over the place. I think he's just with DAZN now, though. but he was network hopping quite frequently in the past. Josh says, having an affair with Thierry Henry on CBS, isn't she? Shout out to Benny Stacks. Shout out to Ocean Blue. Jackie Boy Johnson, if I didn't shout him out already. Shout out to Ayed and Kyle. Jay Silver says, wonder, is Hatman, I guess you meant to say, has Hatman heard of Purple Aki? Yeah, I've heard of Purple Aki. Weird guy. Weird that he is still safe and sound and hasn't done much longer stretches in prison. So, yeah, very weird what goes on with Purple Aki. Ayed says Pat Brown's opponent was tough. Was. Oh, does he fought today? I know it was his debut, right? I assumed it would be tomorrow. I guess he's fought today. JR says Riddick Bowe versus Vitaly Klitschko prime for prime. It's a very good fight. I lean towards Klitschko slightly. But Klitschko was a bleeder. And, you know, you look at the way that Lennox Lewis fought Klitschko. There's an argument to be made that Riddick Bowe's actually better at that type of fighting. Lennox Lewis was certainly a better long-range boxer than Riddick Bowe, despite the fact they were the same height, very similar reach and whatnot. Lennox Lewis was just more mobile and better on the back foot and moving around and what have you. But there's an argument to be made that Riddick Bowe was better on the front foot, taking fighters into the trenches, particularly taller fighters. Lewis could do it well, don't get it twisted. He did it plenty of times, amateur and pro. But perhaps Bowe was even better at doing it. My only question mark with Riddick Bowe in that regard is over his chin. Because Riddick Bowe didn't fight many punchers. And when he did fight punchers, for example, he fought Andrew Galotta, he got hurt multiple times, he got dropped multiple times in the second fight. And Galotta wasn't a monster puncher, but he was a decent puncher. Other than that, I mean, Jorge Luis Gonzalez could punch, but he never managed to land anything on Riddick Bowe that was substantial. And as I say, other than that, Riddick Bowe never really fought any punches. So it remains to be seen how he would hold up to Vitaly Klitschko's power. Not that Vitaly Klitschko was a monster puncher himself. He obviously had a very high knockout percentage, but that was mostly due to accumulation. He would break you down by landing consistently. That's how he tended to get his stoppages, rather than going in there and knocking people out with one punch. His brother, Vladimir, despite having a lower knockout percentage, virtually all of the mutual opponents that had said that Vladimir hit much harder. It's just that Vitaly would land more on you. Now, Jimbo Jones says, Pat Brown debuted today. He looked great. He seems to be much better than Chev Clark. Yeah, I would expect him to be. I haven't even seen him box in his debut yet. I've seen some of his amateur bouts, but I would expect him to be better than Chev Clark. No disrespect to Chev Clark, but I never rated him particularly highly. Shout out to G-Man in the chat. Snooker Fan TV says, hardest hitting heavyweight ever. Ugh. Who knows? Probably somebody we've never heard of. Because there are, journeymen out there that can hit as hard as world champions or harder. Jackie Boy Johnson says, Lennox Lewis never really had a weak chin. He was knocked down by big punchers. Yeah, I wouldn't say that Lewis had a weak chin. That's how he was characterized, of course, by the American press, and therefore by extension, by the American public. But no, it was overblown. Lewis never had a weak, quote-unquote, chin. He had kind of an average chin. Or maybe even slightly above average. Because he went in there, for example, against Frank Bruno. He got rocked against Bruno, but other than that, he took Bruno's punches okay. Never went down and obviously got the stoppage. He went in there against Ray Mercer and took an awful lot of shots from Mercer. That fight was fought in a very small ring. Lewis, being a tall guy, didn't have the space to move around, so he was forced to actually fight in the trenches for large stretches against Mercer, who could punch. Mercer hit him bang on the chin many times in that fight, and nothing happened. Lewis took it. He also came through a firefight with Shannon Briggs. Again, he was rocked in the first round, but Briggs couldn't put him down. Lewis came through that. And of course, against Vitaly Klitschko, he took all Vitaly Klitschko's best shots. Didn't go down. If he had a weak chin, he wouldn't have got through those situations. So, yeah, Lewis never had a weak chin. I would say he had maybe slightly above average chin. Certainly didn't have an iron jaw. Set says there was a Cuban amateur who KO'd David Tua by a single shot. You're talking about Felix Savon. And actually, if you watch that fight, David Tua slips as he's falling, and his face actually hits Felix Savon's knee. And that's actually what knocked him out. And I think David Tua spoke about that at some point during his professional career. He was actually KO'd by Felix Savon's knee. Go and watch the fight back, right? On YouTube, even if they don't have a slow-mo of it. Change the YouTube setting to like a quarter speed or as low as you can go. I think there's even like a custom speed setting you can have now on YouTube videos. Yeah? Go and watch that fight and you'll see that David Tua actually hits his face on Savon's knee. I can't remember if the shot really hurts him. Because there's like a right hand from Savon. I can't even remember if it lands that well. But anyway, Tua appears to like slip. And then he hits his face on Savon's knee. Yeah. And Tua was about 17 at the time. I did speak about this in a recent live stream. Tua was only 17. I think he was 17 or 18 when he fought Felix Savon. Savon was like in his late 20s or something. So Savon was like a fully grown man, full man strength, and he was a great puncher. And Tua was just the boy. Yeah, people are bringing up accusations against Savon, which maybe I'll talk about on a different platform. Got to be careful on this platform talking about certain things. Shout out to Black Dynamite. He says, the name Pat Brown is another Luke Partridge. The name's got no power to it. Sounds like a postman's name. It's not quite as weak as Luke Partridge and funny, because Luke Partridge is not just weak. It's a funny name, isn't it? It's just, Luke Partridge cracks me up, that name. And of course, that's why it triggers the Tyson Fury fanboys so much, because it's a comical name. Yeah? So it's like it's a weak name in the sense that you wouldn't associate the name Luke Partridge with a successful world level elite, serious boxer. Pat Brown isn't quite as comical. It's not comical at all, really, Pat Brown, but it does sound like somebody who's a postman Pat, or someone from down the pub. It doesn't have that ring of success about it. I agree with you on that. Pat Brown. Yeah, but, we'll see. Maybe he'll break the mold. Because you look at the guys at the top of boxing, and none of them have got names that sound out of place at the elite level. Do you know what I mean? Alexander Usyk, it sounds like one of those mysterious and kind of intimidating Eastern European names. It doesn't sound weird or weak in any way. Tyson Fury, he was better off he's better off with the Tyson Fury name rather than the Luke Partridge name. Tyson Fury is a good name. It's got power to it. It's got substance to it. Deontay Wilder, yeah, that's cool. It's wild by name, wild by nature. Anthony Joshua even sounds like a guy who's been at the top of boxing. So yeah, those names, they have a certain power, a certain resonance to them. Even at cruiserweight, Myris Breedis, Jael Pataya. Yeah, these names have got something about them. Throw Pat Brown in the mix. Pat Brown. He might be better off insisting that people call him Patrick. Assuming his first name is actually Patrick. Because Patrick Brown, it's still a bit Postman Pat down the pub, but not as much as Pat. So maybe Patrick Brown. Kyle says, I swear Moses Atalma isn't called Moses. Yeah, on BoxRec, his name is listed as Enrique, which sounds a bit Enrique Iglesias, right? Enrique Atalma. That's a bit weird. I wouldn't say it's a weak name, but it's a bit weird, isn't it? Enrique Atalma. He's definitely better off going with Moses. Mark Hatch says Rocky Marciano is a good name too. Completely agree. Great name. Rocky Marciano. Sounds like he's ready for war, and he was. Josh says Johnny Fisher sounds like a future world champion. That's an example of what we're talking about. Names have power, and other names don't have power. And Johnny Fisher is not a name that seems powerful, does it, in a boxing sense? Johnny Fisher. Never mind just in a boxing sense. Can you imagine the leader of a country, the prime minister or the president of a country being called Johnny Fisher? Prime Minister Johnny Fisher. It's like, nah. They'd never allow it. Regardless of his policies or how good an orator he was or how willing he was to toe the line and do the bidding of the big corporations, they just never allow him to hold the reins of power. Even if it's just superficially as a figurehead with a name like Johnny Fisher. Jimbo Jones says Boris Johnson. All right, touche. But I don't think Boris Johnson, because Boris Johnson sounds aristocratic. And British politics has always been full of aristocrats. So, yeah, Boris Johnson is a buffoonish name, and he's a buffoonish man, but it's not really out of place in the UK Parliament with all them toffs in there. Because some of them toffs have got weird toffee names, right? So, but Johnny Fisher could never be mistaken for an aristocratic name. Do you know what I mean? Johnny Fisher is bangers and mash, mate. It's jelly deals, it's bangers and mash. It's building sites. Yeah, that's Johnny Fisher. It's down the pub. That's right, Ocean Blue. His first name's actually Alexander. Yes, that's correct. He preferred to use the name Boris for whatever reason. But yeah, his first name is actually Alexander Johnson. That's a very good point. Very good point. His name's actually Alexander Johnson. An aristocrat. Cal says Gordon Brown. Gordon Brown's aight. It's not like Johnny Fisher. You know? Johnny Fisher. It's like Johnny. No, it don't work. Not as the leader of a country. Yeah, Johnny Fisher is Weatherspoons, as Evil Uncle Phil said there. That's what it is. It's Weatherspoons. It's Greg's. Do you know what I mean? It's a sausage and bean pasty from Greg's. Or a steak bake. That's what Johnny Fisher is. Naeem says John Fish. That reminded me of the old weatherman, Michael Fish. Who remembers the old UK weatherman, Michael Fish? What was that weird song? What was the other weather? Was the other weatherman called John Ketley? Or was it Tetley? Because there was some weird song. It was like John Ketley is a weatherman, a weatherman, a weatherman, and so is Michael Fish. There was some weird song from back in it. I don't know where that song came from. Yeah. Oh, there you go. Here's a Greg's customer. Dogwater says sausage and bean melt. That's the correct name for it. The sausage and bean melt. That's a crazy name in itself, right? Gareth A. Davis. Yeah, always with the middle initial. Corey King says, love when Big John Fisher is on a diet and he shows you all the healthy food from the Chinese. As if it's not all deep fried. Yeah, a Chinese takeaway is not somewhere where you would go for healthy food of any sort. KS says Big John Fisher is the whole bakery. Bosh. Jackie Boy Johnson says, why are there so many Joshes in boxing? Well, it's really why there's so many Joshes in Britain. I guess it's a popular name in Britain, right? Josh and Callum. So many Callums in the UK. Callum and Josh. Black Dynamite says Zinedine Zidane is a dope name. You can tell he was destined to make it. Yeah. That name definitely has a ring about it. Zinedine Zidane, for sure. Linkage says Tim Witherspoon is a weak name. Tim Witherspoon. I don't think it's that weak. Because in America in particular, there were quite a lot of successful people with the surname Witherspoon. You know, like John Witherspoon, the comedian. He was hilarious. John Witherspoon, the comedian from Friday fame, from Boomerang, from the Boondocks. He played Granddad in the Boondocks. He was a legend in American comedy, particularly comedy acting. Jimbo Jones says there are more Jacks. I guess you mean more Jacks than Joshes or Callums. Shout to Seth for the super chat. He says, Usyk versus Ibeabuchi, thoughts on John Jones' skill? I'm not really in a position to be talking about John Jones' skill because I'm very much a casual when it comes to MMA and UFC. So I'm sure you'd be able to speak more about it than me. Usyk versus Ibeabuchi. Ibeabuchi is a big question mark. Yes, we saw him beat Chris Bird and he did it in good fashion. And at heavyweight, I want to say he was the first. Yeah, I'm sure he was the first person to stop Chris Bird. But didn't Chris Bird get stopped by Vladimir Klitschko as well? I know he got stopped later on in his career when he moved down in weight. But, yeah, Ibeabuchi was obviously the first person to give David Tua a defeat and whatnot. He was very formidable, but we don't quite know how good he was. He never fought the elite guys. He never got the opportunity because he got locked up for decades. So there's a lot of guesswork with Ibeabuchi. So I have to play it safe and say Alexander Usyk beats him. KS says Bernie Mac and John Witherspoon legends. Yup. I remember the Bernie Mac show. Bernie Mac on the Bernie Mac show was always complaining about the kids. It was like, I'm going to bust their head to the white meat show. You'd never be able to get away with saying something like that on a show nowadays. Talking about beating kids until... That's crazy. Gonna bust their head to the white meat show. Josh says Donald Trump is probably the best example of overcoming a bad name. In the UK, Donald Trump is a terrible name. Trump actually used to be a word. I don't know if it still is. It used to be another word for fart in like UK slang. So in the UK, yeah, Donald Trump would be a terrible name. But in America, it's actually a pretty good name. You know, a lot of people in America have names that would be unusual in the UK. So for America, it's a good name because Trump doesn't mean fart. In America, Trump means to be better than. I mean, even in the UK, it's obviously has that same meaning. Trump is to, like, you know, be better. But at the same time as Trump meaning fart in the UK, there also used to be a card game that some kids used to play in the playground called Top Trumps, which was the little, yeah, somebody mentioned it there, Top Trumps. Chris Ward says he went insane, though. Thought he was the ruler of the world. I guess he's talking about Beabucci. Yeah, Beabucci, his nickname was the president. And he insisted on everybody calling him the president, even like in social settings. You're not allowed to call me Ike. You must address me as the president. Yeah, Beabucci, crazy as a box of frogs. Jimbo Jones says there's a UK boxer called Sonny Liston Ali. Yeah, and there's another young UK boxer that's called like Sugar Roy Jones. He's got some like, you know, knockoff name. Jay Silver says Sonny Liston is a bad boy name. Yep. It's got some strength to it. Yeah, Delicious Ori is somebody's alluding to there. That's a terrible name, bro. Literally sounds like some kind of male stripper. Or even a female stripper. Delicious Ori. His dad had it in for him when he gave him that name. Because apparently his dad gave him the name. It's a shocker. Chris Ward saying Trump means powerful, Trump card the best. Yeah, we've been over the meaning of Trump. To trump somebody means to best them, to overcome them, to be better than them. But again, in UK slang, at least back in the days, it also meant fart. Somebody's just trumped. Kylie says it sounds like an ice cream. Yeah, Delicious Ori does sound like an ice cream. Lamont Roach, does that sound that bad? I don't think Lamont Roach is that bad. Freddie Roach, right? Evil Uncle Phil says Joe Frazier is a solid boxing name indeed. Yeah, William Skull is not a good name. But I wouldn't say it's the worst name of all. But it's not a good name. Matthew Jones says, why hasn't Parker versus Triple D been re-announced after the illness? Surely just re-announce a date. Because of the time constraints. Alexander Usyk has said he's only going to fight 2 more times. Daniel Dubois wants a crack at becoming undisputed. The WBO have put a mandatory on Usyk. The other sanctioning bodies are going to put mandatories on him pretty shortly. The IBF have just put a mandatory on him. That means that the belts are going to get scattered. So if they reschedule the Dubois-Parker fight, then Usyk might get stripped of a belt in the meantime, and then Dubois won't get the opportunity to fight for undisputed. So it's as straightforward as that. That's why, forget about rescheduling the Parker fight, just go straight into the Usyk fight. You can fight Parker after that if he wins, or even if he loses, if Parker's still interested. Connor says, Razor Ruddock, I know his real name isn't Razor, but that sounds pretty tough. Yeah, Razor Ruddock was a good name, and the footballer took the boxer's name, by the way. Razor Ruddock, who played for Liverpool, he named himself after the boxer. Razor Ruddock's first name is Donovan, which was a very popular name in Jamaica for a time. I'm not sure if it still is, but Donovan was a very common name in Jamaica for a long time. There are so many Donovans in Jamaica. I remember back in the 90s, there were some very weird names. There was a fighter called Elvis Parsley. Look him up on BoxRec. You'll find him. Elvis Parsley. Almost reminds me of Charlie Partridge. No, not Charlie Partridge. Charlie Parsons. Or Charlie Parsnips, as I call him. But yeah, back in the days, there was a fighter called Elvis Parsley. And there was another one who was from the Far East somewhere, one of the Oriental countries, and he was called 3K Battery, or was it K3 Battery? Like a literal Duracell battery? He's either K3 or 3K Battery. Look him up on BoxRec. Absolutely bizarre. I think he was a world champion as well, 3K Battery. Joe Stuttard says, what would be the worst name imaginable? Charlie Parsnips. There you go. I've given him the worst name imaginable. Charlie Partridge, Charlie Parsnips. Striker says it was 3K Battery. Okay, either you've checked on BoxRec or you remember. Yeah, what a bizarre name. Ebo Sosa says David Thunder was always a corny name. Well, there was a heavyweight from back in the days who fought Derek Williams and various others called Jimmy Thunder. He was either from Australia or New Zealand. He was a Pacific Islander. Very muscular fighter. Jimmy Thunder. JR, is that a real name? Surely not. Surely the parents weren't so cruel, JR, to actually give their son, well, presumably his name would have been William, right? Or excuse me, Richard. And then they shortened it to that, but that's crazy, bro. Joe says, Lovejoy. Yeah, it always reminds me of the old TV series from back in the 1990s. Lovejoy. Shout out to B-Tech Graham in the chat. He says, you see tonight's card? What did you think of Vong? I haven't seen the card. I'll have to catch up on it after the stream. But shout out to B-Tech Grime. Instagram legend. Evil Uncle Phil says, Frank Bruno sounds like a pop singer's name. It actually does. A pop singer from the 80s, like Frank Bruno. Yeah, kind of. Old Mongoose says, prime for Prime Mercer or Povetkin, who takes it? It's a tough one. I'll go with Povetkin just. It's a very tough one. And another day I might say Mercer. Juan Rodriguez says, I remember some news report years ago about the most ridiculous names in the UK. Some poor kid was named Bus Stop 13. Yeah, that's right, Striker. Lots of those Thailand fighters had weird names because they took the names of their sponsors. Well, I didn't know that they were taking the names of their sponsors, but I knew a lot of the Thailand fighters had weird names. So thank you for that piece of info there. Gavin says, remember Crawford Grimsley? Yes. Crawford Grimsley got knocked out in like a second or two. In fact, it might have been Jimmy Thunder that done him in like 2 seconds. Because somebody mentioned Jimmy Thunder getting knocked out quick. He might have got knocked out quick at some point in his career, but I'm pretty sure it was Jimmy Thunder who knocked out Crawford Grimsley in like 2 seconds. Or was it somebody? I swear Grimsley did get knocked out in a couple seconds by somebody. And Crawford Grimsley, of course, is a terrible name. In fact, let me look that up. Let me have a look. Crawford Grimsley. It's that surname that's killing him. Grimsley. Sounds like something out of Harry Potter, that surname. Yes, he did get knocked out by Jimmy Thunder at 13 seconds of the first round. So yeah, I was right. Jimmy Thunder knocked out Crawford Grimsley in 13 seconds. I'm sure that fight will be on YouTube. I remember that from back in the days. Yes, Crawford Grimsley. He was one of these cream puffs that they dug up out of God knows where to challenge George Foreman on his victory lap for some spurious heavyweight titles. Because at this point, Foreman had either vacated or been stripped of the legitimate heavyweight titles that he won from Michael Moorer. And he was fighting instead for the IBA heavyweight title and the WBU heavyweight title. And so they were, digging up all sorts of misfits for him to fight in his old age. And Crawford Grimsley was one of them. Aha, there you go, Striker. Yeah, the 13 seconds included the count. So it's literally the first punch, fight was over. Jimmy Thunder done him. Shout out to Gorguga. Okay, he's talking about the earthquake in Thailand. Yeah, I heard about it. Mura's man says Jimmy Thunder was absolutely jacked. Yeah, he was. He was chiseled. KS says Elon Musk is a weirdo. Strange that a supposed genius can't even string a sentence together without stuttering. I agree. Elon Musk, I think, is more of a front man than any kind of genius, Tony Stark type figure. He's a front man. There's been some great videos done by a guy called Mark Dice on Elon Musk. Go look up those videos. Mark Dice, Elon Musk. Look them up. And you'll find that a lot of the stuff that Musk supposedly invented, he didn't invent at all. He just bought up with his money from his dad and whatnot. because he tried to create this narrative that he came from nothing. It's absurd. His dad was a well-to-do man. All the nonsense. Josh says, Edna the Cherry Bomb Cherry. Yeah, from the Bahamas. Juan says, didn't even found Tesla. That's correct. Gavin Hastings knows as well. It says it's weird that Elon Musk pretended to be number one at Diablo. He paid someone to boost his. Yeah. You look into his background and it's a load of that. That's correct. Dynamite, his dad, his family had an emerald mine in South Africa, indeed. During the apartheid era. Say no more. Jackie Boy Johnson says Elon Musk is not a great name either. I'd have to disagree with that. I think Elon Musk has a ring to it. A ring of success about it. To be honest. It's an unusual name. It's, kind of short and snappy. I think it has power to it, that name. Even if he has embellished a lot of his backstory, which he definitely has, the name, I think, is still powerful. One of the things I always liked about Thai kickboxing is the fact that during their shows and their bouts, they're always playing their music. The weird, wind instrument thing that they play and the different drums and whatever that they play in the Thai boxing matches. I always liked that. And there was one of the Riyadh season shows where I can't remember if it was during the rounds. I think it was in between rounds. They started playing Arabic music. I like stuff like that. Throw in a bit of the local culture to these boxing events. Don't just make them like this, generic copy and paste stuff from America or the UK. Bring in a flavor of the local culture into the shows. I like that. As I say, I like when in Thailand they're playing the music and what have you. And, when they did a little bit of that at one of the Riyadh season shows, they started bringing in Arabic drummers, and I thought it was cool. It's like Street Fighter vibes, All right, this is the point of the stream where my tab crashes. Just waiting for it to come back. There we go. Oh, not quite. Let's refresh it again. You guys know the routine. There we are. Tab's always got to crash a couple times. Now, Linkage says that's snake trauma music. Yeah. It does sound like that, the Thai music. That's right. Damn. Gorguga says, I'm in Thailand at the moment. Had to run down 24 floors of a swinging building. Damn. Glad you got out okay. Wow. Must be pretty chaotic out there right now after what's happened. Sully says, did you see Paulie's last video last week getting at Turkey? Yes, I did see it. I did indeed see it. He was talking about, Turkey's involvement with, could you describe it as a coup? When the current ruler, de facto ruler of Saudi Arabia, MBS, took over, he basically wrestled power from some of his other family members. So it was like an internal power struggle in the Saudi royal family. And so one of the UK newspapers, I think it was The Guardian, reported that Turki al-Sheikh was involved in threatening people and stuff like that. And that's what Paulie Malignaggi was speaking about on his channel. So he was basically saying that, Paulie was saying that all these people distanced themselves from the Kinahans, right? After it emerged that they were linked to MTK, or maybe running MTK, bankrolling it, however you want to describe it, owned it, whatever. And all these channels started saying, okay, we're not going to have any MTK fighters anymore, so on and so forth. And he's saying that people are practicing selective outrage because they took that stance with the Kinahans, but when it comes to the Saudis and the stuff that they've been up to and the stuff they've done, they turn a blind eye. And yeah, they do turn a blind eye, but that's business and even politics in general. Hypocrisy is everywhere. You'll very rarely find a news organization or a corporation or a political party that are morally consistent, or even a government. Yeah? You'll very rarely find any of them that are morally consistent. My take on it is, every country in the world, just about, has got blood on their hands. Some have got a lot more blood on their hands than others. Yeah? The United States has got unbelievable amounts of blood on its hands. From stuff they've been doing overseas, stuff that their corporations are doing, stuff that their intelligence agencies like the CIA are doing, and even domestically especially when you go a few decades back. Assassinations, COINTELPRO, black people living under Jim Crow. How many people were saying, we're not going to stage fights in the United States because they're lynching black people and they don't have the right to vote? And who is saying that? Nobody. People were happy to watch stuff in the United States, go there, holiday there, so on and so forth. So I don't see watching fights in Saudi or watching Riyadh season cards as an endorsement of the government there and the actions of their government. Maybe some people interpret it that way, but I don't see it that way. I just like the fact that we can get the fights we want. The fighters can get paid well. I'm looking at those benefits. Does it benefit the Saudi state? Yes, it does. But again, there are many things that the American state during my lifetime has done that I profoundly disagree with. Terrible things. But yeah, I didn't boycott watching boxing in the United States. Do you know what I mean? Google says, thanks, Hatman. All good now. Just the apartment walls are all cracked up, so they're calling in surveyors. Can you move out? Because I wouldn't even feel safe staying there after that. I definitely have to move out. ASAP. Now, Dominic K says, more recently, apartheid was seen as legal in the West before the uprising. Yes, apartheid was widely supported by many Western countries. Indeed. And speaking of Elon Musk's granddad was a huge supporter of apartheid, by the way. Yeah, Elon Musk's granddad, who is from Canada, was such a massive supporter of apartheid that's actually one of the main reasons he moved to South Africa. Copen says, do you believe in aliens? Surely human beings are not alone in the solar system. Do you mean the universe rather than the solar system? I'm agnostic on it. I mean, if you listen to scientists and mathematicians, they say that the statistical probability is that the universe is full of life. That there will be all sorts of alien creatures out there, but people are talking about intelligent life that can traverse the universe and whatnot. Who knows? Maybe there is. I've never been out there. You know, none of us will, in our mortal bodies, live long enough to be able to explore the universe and what have you to find out one way or the other. But I'm open to the possibility for sure. Okay, Hasbol says, I think sportsmen should be allowed to juice under controlled, I guess you mean conditions, to the point where it won't harm your organs, enlarge heart, etc. Why can't you take things to speed up recovery? Just odd. Well, there have been multiple, even fighters over the years who have advocated for the legalization of PEDs in boxing because they say that as it stands right now, a lot of the cash cow fighters are taking PEDs and getting away with it because they generate so much money. And so, therefore, to level the playing field, they should allow everybody to take PEDs. That argument's been made many times. I think Tony Thompson even made that argument at one point. Seth says, are we even in a universe? Who's to say we aren't in someone's simulation? Yeah, but then what is the simulation? That, you know, is the universe as we perceive it from the vantage point of the Earth not physical? I mean, yeah, it's a simulation. The Earth is, let's say everything is a simulation. But even within a simulation, let's say in a video game, or some video games, you can go out and actually, for example, in the video game No Man's Sky, you can explore the universe and go to different planets. So if this reality is a simulation, what's the nature of it? Is the sky just like, you know, somewhere we can't actually go in terms of the other stars and whatnot? Or could we physically go there if it's a simulation? Seth says, like a video game, but we are in... Yeah, I understand that. That's the whole simulation theory. But in a video game, you could still go to other planets inside the video game. Yeah, I know what you mean, but you're not really explaining... Because, like, to say that the universe is a simulation, okay, but then there's still a universe. It just happens to be a simulation, right? You can still go to all the stars and the planets and everything. There's physics within the simulation and so on. KS says in Islam there's a concept of other beings called jinns. Yeah, that's where the anglicized word genie comes from the Arabic jinn. The jinn was said to be made of smokeless fire. And there are many stories in Arab culture about jinn in the desert, they say that some jinn can shapeshift into wild dogs. I forget the term that they would use for these particular canine species that live in the desert. Let's just call them wild dogs. And they would say that they would hang out near graveyards and then shapeshift into like human creatures. So that some jinn would do that in Arab mythology. Yeah, jinn are basically just the Arab version of demons. It's basically the same thing. Shout out to B-Tech Grant for the super chat. He says, love the videos. Get me through work. What's your thoughts on moon landings, hoax or real? All right, that's a hell of a question. I've seen all the arguments for them being a hoax. And there's certainly I've certainly got a lot of questions about them. My suspicion is that there's something about those moon landings that's not quite right. I think there's a possibility that some of the footage might have been hoaxed footage in order to disguise the technology that they had from the Soviets, right, from the Russians and whatnot, but that they did actually go to the moon. It's just that they didn't show all of the real stuff to the public for reasons of national security. But I am certainly not against the notion that the whole thing was hoaxed. I'm not against that notion. But having looked into it, I'm like, I tend to suspect they probably did go, but maybe some of the footage was hoaxed for, as I say, reasons of national security. B-Tech Graham says, I'm going real, you know. Yeah, I'm like, I'm more leaning towards the idea that they did go, but they just hid certain aspects of the moon missions from the public. I'm more on that side of things. And if you're trying to hide certain aspects of the missions from the public, you're going to need to come up with some fake photos and some fake footage here and there. Because again, during the space race, why would they show the Soviets everything they have? Do you know what I mean? Surely they'd at least try to hide some stuff from their rivals and obfuscate certain things. Ryan S. says, like hell, the president was talking to astronauts on the phone. Yeah, that bit was funny. You know, they said, how how absurd it was and how naive people were back in the 60s, where they thought the president could pick up the phone and talk to somebody on the moon. But I did see someone give an explanation for that sounded plausible to me. I can't remember what the explanation was, so I can't give it to you right now. But it seems ridiculous, right? But I did hear someone give an explanation for that particular thing that sounded plausible. Ryan S. says, watch American Moon, it exposes the entire charade. I'm not sure if I've seen that, but I've seen a lot of Bart Sabrell's work on the Apollo missions. A funny thing happened on the way to the moon and all that. Not sure if you're familiar with Bart Sabrell, but I've seen all those documentaries and what have you and videos he's done over the years. You know, there's one hypothesis, claim, theory, whatever you want to call it, that they did go to the moon and they saw stuff up there which they weren't prepared to see. Do you know what I mean? You know, like in a 2001 Space Odyssey type of way, and they were maybe warned by some entities up there not to come back. I'm not saying that that's true, but that's just one of the claims and theories that are out there. Jackie Boy Johnson says, think about how much we've advanced scientifically and technologically over the last 100 years. Getting to the moon should seem like a piece of cake. That's true. That's true. That's always a good argument. The computing power of the shuttle back in the 1960s is not even as powerful as an iPhone now. Even the computers that they had in NASA, not as powerful as an iPhone. Internet Tough Guy says we haven't landed since. Well, other countries have apparently been there. Wasn't India apparently on the moon and China recently? If you believe their footage, they were apparently there. There are so many lies that are told to the public about countless different things. I fully understand why some people or many people are skeptical about everything, because the track record of the ruling class is terrible when it comes to just lying and pulling the wool over people's eyes. With that being said, not everything that they say is a lie. There are going to be some things that they say that are true. So you have to keep that in mind as well. But again, the skepticism is completely understandable. I'm very skeptical about them, but there are going to be some things that are true. Because, you know, some people end up getting into the mindset where they literally think that and I've heard people say this, that every single thing that we are told about everything is a lie. And that's ridiculous. Kyle says, why haven't they gone back to the moon? Well, other countries apparently have. Well, they haven't put humans on the moon, but they have put, like, apparently probes and rovers and stuff like that up there. B-Tech Graham says Purple Aki on the moon. That's what they need to put that guy. God damn it. Tony S. says they destroyed all the blueprints for the Apollo 11 missions. Makes you wonder. Yeah, all the telemetry data destroyed and thrown away, apparently, which is very weird. Very weird. Like, one of the greatest achievements, if not the greatest in human history. Surely you would keep all the telemetry data and whatnot. Apparently just all dashed away because they were clearing the vaults or whatever to make space for other stuff. I mean, yeah, that is very weird. Cal says, thoughts on Neil deGrasse Tyson? A shill and a stooge. Got no time for the guy. Idiot. Yeah, I often come to the suspicion that black and white thinking is, how can I put this? There are like normies who believe that everything that officialdom says, everything that comes from, university professors and officials from the government and NGOs and whatnot. There are those types. And then there are people on the other side who think everything is fake and everything is a lie, right? I think it's a lot more nuanced than that. I don't think the black and white approach, it's either this extreme or that extreme, is going to serve you well in your quest to find the truth about things. It's like if you look back into, let's say, the 1800s and whatnot, when they were digging up dinosaur bones and supposedly the skeletons of giant humans and whatnot. On one side, you've got people who say they were all hoaxes. And on the other side, not necessarily the dinosaur bones, but like the giant humans and whatnot. It was all hoaxes. Then on the other side, you got people who say, oh, they're covering things up. They're covering giant humans. They're covering this. They're covering that. So on and so forth. Both things can be true. Because there's absolutely no question about it. That there've always been charlatans out there. And especially back then. Like in the 1800s. There was all sorts of charlatans that were claiming that they discovered, monster bones. Originally, I don't think they were even calling them dinosaurs. But yeah. Giant creatures, dragons or whatever. There was always charlatans claiming that they'd found all sorts of stuff. So they could write books and do tours and etc., etc. But at the same time as all the charlatans, you might have real cover-ups of, I don't know, giant humans or whatever the case may be. So it doesn't have to be either or. There can be shades of gray, Shout out to Josh for the super chat. He says, do you have an opinion on the Shroud of Turin? I'm not religious, but watched Dr. John Campbell's video on it. It was interesting. Yes, I do have an opinion on it. And I think that it is a hoax, a fake. And that last I checked, I think that's kind of the general consensus, that it's a fake. And I've looked into it extensively over the years. And yes, I think it's a fake. Do I think that that is the shroud of the biblical Jesus? Hell no. There isn't actually any proof that the biblical Jesus existed. There are historical Jesuses, but the historical Jesuses don't have the same life as the biblical Jesus. You see it? So if you're talking about the biblical Jesus, Turin Shroud, no, I don't think that was his death shroud, if he even existed. I think that was an example of a religious forgery because certainly in centuries gone by, the church had so much power, and in times when they felt like they were losing their power or in times when they felt like they wanted to have more power, what better thing to have than the bloody death shroud of Jesus himself? Do you know what I mean? That's one way to bring the congregation in. Jay Silver says, will scientists do say there were humans bigger than us Homo sapiens, or are you talking about actual giants? Well, this is the thing. How do you define giant? There have been claims over the years and photos that look to me as fake as a £3 note of giants in the desert of Saudi Arabia that are like 30 or 40 foot tall. I've never seen any evidence of those things existing. So if they did exist, boy, the bones must be disintegrated or being hidden away somewhere, because I've never seen any convincing evidence of humans growing that large. Again, I can't dismiss the possibility that sometime in the past such beings did exist. I don't know, I wasn't there, but I've never seen any evidence for it. But those were the things that were being claimed over the maybe last couple centuries. You know, there'd be some explorer here or explorer there. Oh, we found a thigh bone that was like 10 feet long and it was of a human. Or we found a skeleton of a dragon or this, that. You know, there's always been those kind of people. Especially during the colonial era, because during the colonial era, let's say in Britain, you had these explorers going out to the far corners of the world, and they were bringing back evidence of exotic creatures, which were unknown to Europe, such as, I mentioned this in a previous live stream as well, the duck-billed platypus. When the reports of the duck-billed platypus were first brought back to Europe, Britain and whatnot, the academics at the time were saying, well, this has got to be a hoax. This is silly nonsense. A creature with the snout of a duck, the body of an otter, and the tail of a beaver. This has got to be some stitch-up job, literally. It's a load of nonsense. But of course, the duck-billed platypus turned out to be very real. There was even a time when European explorers didn't believe that the African gorilla was a real creature. There was a time in relatively recent history when they didn't think that the giant panda in China was a real creature. So during that era, when supposedly mythological creatures were being proven to be real, you could see the opportunity under that climate for hoaxing to run rampant. Do you know what I mean? Because people were discovering and what have you, I say discovering in inverted commas, they were finding knowledge of creatures in far-flung places of the world that would seem fantastical but actually turned out to be real. JR says, do you think Plato's writings on Atlantis are purely fictional? I suspect they are based on something real. That's my suspicion. The question is what? Because, of course, people have got all sorts of notions about what Atlantis was and, you know, they let their imagination get carried away. He might have been describing something relatively mundane compared to the fantastical extrapolations that people are making. One thing I do find fascinating is that area, I think it's in the Sahara, where there's this, what appears to be a perfect circle. Have you guys seen that? I think it's in the Western Sahara. I'm not sure what geologists and scientists have said about it in terms of the explanation for it. I'm going to try to look it up now and find out what it's called. But that is a bizarre thing. There's like this enormous circle. Okay, so it's called the, I think this is the same one, the Rishat structure. I think it's the Rishat structure. And some people have wondered whether that was actually Atlantis, because Atlantis was described as concentric rings. So look up the Rishat circle in the Sahara. Now, if this were the site of the mythical Atlantis, then obviously it would be contingent on sea levels being much lower, so then you could work out, because with these various computer models, they say they can work out what the sea levels were at various times in history. So work out when the sea level was high enough to submerge that structure, or not submerge, but come up to the sides of that structure. The sea level was high enough to come up to the sides of that structure. But yeah, look up the Rishat structure. Bizarre. Maybe it's a natural formation, but if it is a natural formation, you have to wonder why there aren't other natural formations around it. It's a very strange thing. Looking at the Wikipedia page here to see what their geological explanation for it is, because it's a very, very weird thing. I guess they're saying it's the result of some type of volcanic activity. Okay. I don't know enough about geology to be able to tell you whether or not, I find it convincing, because it's very complex geology going on here. Very, very complex. So, yeah, I don't know enough about geology to be able to tell you whether this is convincing or seems a bit iffy. You guys have a look at it for yourselves. The Rishat structure. It's spelled Richat. Rishat. Somebody says, don't ask Neil deGrasse Tyson. Indeed, don't ask him. I mean, he might give you the right answer, but he's such a stooge and such a shill for the establishment that there's no point. Jay Silver says, I'm talking like Neanderthal big, so like 7-8 feet. Neanderthals, to my knowledge, were nowhere near that size. Neanderthals, to my knowledge, were much shorter than modern humans. They had much thicker bones, thicker skulls, and they were more robustly built, but they were much shorter than modern humans. Now, Ed says no one seems to care about Area 51 anymore. Yeah, Area 51 was all the rage during the 90s of the X-Files era. The X-Files, Bob Lazar, The Outer Limits, The Lone Gunman. That 90s era where people were obsessed with UFOs. They even had like a UFO, several probably in The Simpsons episodes. They had Mulder and Scully in The Simpsons one time. I think that's the one where they thought there was an alien, but it was actually Mr. Burns. And somehow, like, the radiation from the power plant made him glow at night. And some of you guys may remember that episode. But Area 51 is so pop culture now. That's why people don't talk about it, because it's just, so mainstream and so pop culture, it's lost its edge. Jay Silver says, I thought they were bigger. No. Neanderthals were short. They were short and powerfully built. And I've seen a lot of different claims about the Neanderthals in terms of what they looked like. Because There are some people who claim the Neanderthals look more like apes than humans, but generally when you see reconstructions of them, they look far more like humans. And the latest research that I've seen shows that Neanderthals, like modern humans, actually had a variety of skin colors, because it was for the longest time believed that they only had white skin, but now they believe that they actually had melanated skin as well in certain parts of the world. Although the physical characteristics other than skin color seems to be very similar, from what I've seen anyway, with Neanderthals from various parts of the earth. Again, short, powerfully built, much thicker bones than modern humans have, thicker skulls and stuff like that. All right, my tab has crashed again. Let's get this refreshed. Hold tight. Josh says Nikolai Valuev was the tallest one, I think. Well, yeah, their skulls were a similar shape to a Nikolai Valuev. Indeed. They perhaps didn't look too dissimilar in terms of the head to a Nikolai Valuev. Although much, much shorter. Charlie Poynton says, average Neanderthal males were about 5'5" in height, according to Google. Indeed, yeah, they were short. If you go to the Natural History Museum, they have a quote-unquote Neanderthal skeleton there. I say quote-unquote because pretty much or a lot of the skeletons, I don't want to say most because they've got skeletons of all sorts, even skeletons of animals that still exist today. But a lot of I think all of the dinosaur skeletons in the Natural History Museum and various others are not real skeletons. They're like casts. They're made out of whatever, plaster of Paris or something, and then painted. I'm not sure if the Neanderthal skeleton that they have on display is a real skeleton or one of the molds or whatever, but they do have something that is supposed to be a Neanderthal skeleton in the Natural History Museum in London. All right, peeps, just hit the 2-hour mark. So I'm going to close the curtain on this stream. As always, I appreciate you guys joining the conversation. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed it too. Special shout out to everyone who donated via Super Chat. Until next time, take care, be good. And I'll see you guys on the other side. I'm out.